Good morning, all. Myself, Chandra. So today we will discuss about a Cloud Hub deployment process and how we can build our API in Anypoint Studio, and we will add loggers and analyze that loggers in local environment as well as Cloud Hub environment. And we are going to see the different process of deploying the application into Cloud Hub from Anypoint Studio. So now I'm going to create a new workspace. So by adding the workspace name, you can create a workspace. Okay. So I'm going to create a new Mule project. So you can skip this, continue to studio, create Mule project. And I'm going to name this as a suppliers API. Okay. And the version Mule 4.4 and click on finish. So in previous sessions, we have discussed about the topics like what is a ESP and what is the program and what is the application lifecycle. And also we have discussed sample Hello World application with different types of flows and also different types of exception handling. And now we are going to create this suppliers API with a simple resource like suppliers, get suppliers information with the sample data. So within suppliers API XML, I'm going to add a flow. So go to Mule palette and search for flow and drag and drop the component onto the canvas. Yeah, from the canvas, we are going to add a HTTP listener. Drag and drop the HTTP listener and add a connector configuration. The connector configuration, all interfaces, so that we can access it from even from our local host environment, local environment by using localhost. And also once we deploy this application to Cloud Hub, then also we can able to access this by providing the all interfaces. And the port number 8081 for HTTP ports when we deploy the application to Cloud Hub. So I'm going to use this 8081 port. And base path, if we want to have a common path for all the resources, then we can define this base path. And after that, we are going to provide the actual path or actual resource information on the particular path. So we are going to provide that information here. So suppliers. So our information is like get suppliers. So I'm going to provide that allowed methods in advanced tab. And then I'm going to add a logger. So whenever we add these loggers or whenever we build an API, we must make sure that we are adding a proper logging mechanism and so that we can track the event or the message or the payloads. Okay. So here, start logger, and we know that this is the API flow name, suppliers API flow started. Okay. And the next one, suppliers API flow completed. We need to set a sample payload or data. So we are going to discuss that. Like I have the sample data and it is the array of records of the suppliers. So these suppliers will have information with the supplier number and the supplier name and whether that supplier is active or not, and also the address. I have just address line one. and it is a JSON data format and containing multiple suppliers details. So we can use this information and provide within the flow. So to provide this information, I'm going to make use of set payload component, drag and drop into the canvas, into the flow. And here in the settings value, click on this expansion and mention the value. Here I'm going to use a simple data view expression, percentile DW 2.0, and output as application JSON. You can mention this output application JSON or just output JSON. So I'm going to copy paste that information that we have. So we have this information. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to add a logger, one more logger. So this logger, I'm going to mention it as the information like suppliers payload. So this suppliers payload, I'm going to print it, but I don't want to print the suppliers payload every time. So I can make that condition by using the log level. So if we see this, there is a log level. Level is information is by default, so that whatever the logs that we are going to add by using a log level info, it will be printed whenever uh, the message or the processor is executed. And if we set this level as debug and we deploy the application, so this debug level loggers will not be printed until and unless we are going to mention it which kind of loggers has to be printed. Okay. And error means whenever there is an error within the flow, and if that information is error, then only this will be printed, and trace and warning. So this is the levels of logging mechanism. So I am going to mention the information now for debug mode. And there is one more important thing within the loggers, we can even configure the category. For example, if there are multiple processes within the flow or within the API, and if we wanted to categorize the loggers and track those events based on the category, then we can track the by using category. Here we can mention arg.hpt. So I'm going to define a category as arg.hpt suppliers debug. Since it is a debug one, category I'm mentioning as debug, and this is a get suppliers. You can mention the categories. So I'm going to name both other loggers. Since it is not debug, I'm removing the debug, get suppliers logger, and get suppliers. And if you want to just name it as suppliers tracking, so you can even mention just the tracking log category. So we have mentioned it as the debug logger, and we are logging the payload. So how this will be deferred when we do a deployment within the local environment, and how it is going to print the logs when we deploy the application in Cloudhub environment. We will observe that. So I am going to deploy this application in local environment. Right click on the application and then click run project. So we need to open the Postman to test this application locally. The application is deployed in local environment and we can test this. I am going to use this local host port number 8081 and resource name is suppliers and method is get. So we are now able to get this information. Okay. Now I am going to check the console. Since we have deployed the application and added the logger, these loggers will be printed here. So if we observe this, there is the category name and after the log message that we have added. Okay, in this way, we can define the loggers and level. And if we want to check the logger level on the left side of the console on the particular logger event, you can check this. It is the information logger. And you can even observe these are the Uber pools. So whenever these Uber pool agents are same, that means it is running on the same thread, that entire process. And you can even observe that what is the flow name and what is the processor number that is printing the logger. Okay, all this information you can see. And one more thing is that, so this mule message will be processed as the event-based driven. So whenever any request comes into the mule flows, so it will be considered as a new event. And here the event will be generated based on the UUID, which is new and automatically generated by using a Mulesoft process. And we can even call this as a correlation ID. And if we want to configure the correlation ID and print this in the print it, or you can, if you want to add this into the set payloads, you can do that by using correlation ID. So correlation ID. So whenever you mention this correlation ID, that means this will be printed in the loggers as well. So I'm going to save the changes. I'm just making this change just to observe that whether the correlation ID and the event ID are same or not. Application restarted. Send the request again. Yeah. If we observe this, this is the event ID. And in the first message logger, we have added the correlation ID by using hashtag. So in this way, we can even access the correlation ID or the event ID of the particular request. Okay. And one more thing that we need to observe is that we have added 3 loggers, 2 information loggers and 1 debug logger. In console, we can see only the information loggers. So how can we print the debug loggers? So for that, we need to enable the debug logging by adding the level. So now we are going to deploy this application into Cloudhub and observe how we can enable this debug logging within the Cloudhub. So I'm going to stop the application and let us check. So whenever we run these applications within the local Anypoint Studio, there will be a folder structure generated for the jar file. So target folder structure. So within the target folder, it will generate an jar file for the particular artifact ID and group ID. This artifact ID and group ID are generated or used by using the form.xml. So if we see here, this is the suppliers API and 1.0.0 snapshot application. So this way you can generate the application, whatever the name that you wanted to configure. Okay. Now we can deploy this application in 2 ways into Cloudhub. One is by using the manual mechanism, like you can upload the jar and then you can deploy the application. Deploy API or application. So first is manual upload and second one is deploy to Cloudhub from Anypoint Studio. And there is one more method, like we use Git or code commit or code repositories. So in this way, in generally what will happen when once we need to develop the application or API, firstly, we need to create a repository if it is a new application. If it is new, otherwise, check out the code or API from code repository to our local environment. We will make the changes or develop the API. We will test it locally. If it is working fine, then we will commit the changes. Commit the changes to code repo from local. And from code repo, what will happen? We will create the pipelines. So either it can be a Azure DevOps, or Jenkins, or anything. So by using this CI/CD mechanism, by CI/CD means continuous integration, continuous deployment. What will happen whenever we are going to make the changes and commit the changes into the code repository? From there, we need to already have the setup for the pipeline. So whenever we commit the changes and merge the changes into and test it locally, repo from local to future branch. Basically, it will be a different topic, but I'm just explaining how it will be done. So from our local, we are going to commit the changes to code repository to the feature branch. And from feature branch, we need to merge to actual dev branch or UAT branch. So if we are working on the development feature branch, we will merge the changes to development. Or if it is a UAT feature branch, then we are going to make the changes into the UAT. The process will be like, we are going to create a feature branch from the dev environment or the production master environment. And the changes will be done locally, and the changes we are going to commit into the feature branch. And then the changes will be merged into the dev branch. And from dev branch, if it is successfully tested and happy with the results, then we are going to promote the changes from dev to UAT branch. Like that, it will happen in a real-time environment or the organization level. And here, if we observe that, it will happen by using the pipelines and the releases. Okay, pipelines will trigger the code. Like whenever the code merge happen from feature branch to branch, then the uh, the pipeline will be triggered and it will create a release. So which will be useful to deploy the application. Validation checks. Then it will create a release. So from release, we can deploy to Cloudhub. So this will be configured by admin team. How the deployment will happen from the Azure DevOps releases or Jenkins to Cloudhub deployment. So this will be taken care by the admin team. And we sometimes we might need to create these pipelines. So we will be given the advices and guidelines how we have to create the pipelines and how we need to configure the release pipelines as well. So this is a build pipeline actually, build pipeline and release pipeline. We will see the option deploy the application to Cloudhub from Anypoint Studio. So go to Anypoint Studio, right click on the application, and here go to the Anypoint platform and click on the deploy to Cloudhub. So whenever we need to deploy the application to Cloudhub, we need to configure our Anypoint platform credentials within the Anypoint Studio. Otherwise, we won't be able to deploy the application. I'm going to use a different account. So I'm going to sign out from the existing configured details. Go to Anypoint Studio, preferences. Here click on Anypoint Studio and Anypoint platform authentication. So here you can add the account. Mars 1 and the password. Please provide those details and click on sign in. Click on apply and close. And now right click on the application. Go to Anypoint platform, deploy to Cloudhub. Here choose the environment. And you can mention the API name that you wanted to be deployed, HPT suppliers API, and the deployment target is Cloudhub. And if you want to configure any properties like runtime, version, vcode size, workers, properties, insights, logging, and these things we can configure. So let us understand one by one. Runtime version is the version which Mulesoft runtime engine will run this application. And worker size is something that we wanted to configure the memory for this particular application. Like 0.1 vcodes is the worker size. That means 500 MB megabytes of memory will be assigned to this particular application to run within the machine. And this will be automatically assigned and will be deployed in a Mulesoft hosted mission. And the number of workers means number of missions this application needs to be deployed. So it is like a adding the servers or adding the missions for this application. So number of workers will be like a horizontal scaling. We are going to add the servers or missions to this application. And worker size is like a vertical scaling, which means we can increase the memory size within this particular mission or particular instance, and we can increase the vcode size. So here I'm going to use deploy application option. Now we can close this window. Now go to Anypoint platform from any browser. And once you log into this Anypoint platform account, on the main dashboard, you have an option, Runtime Manager. Click on it. Here, select the option, Sandbox Environment. And within this sandbox environment, since we have deployed the application HPT Suppliers API from Anypoint Studio, and that application is added and it is deployed. So you can check this application name, target is Cloudhub, and status is started, and the runtime version and when it was modified. Click on this API and we can go to logs. As of now, we can see that the application is started and with the application status and also the listener and what are the flows that are available, whether it is started or not. All this information we can see within the logs. So how we can see these logs means once, let me reopen it. From the environment, go to the applications tab, and from the applications, you can select the application that you wanted to verify the logs. Click on that application. And this is the dashboard. So in this dashboard, you can see the usage limit of CPU and also the memory and the number of mule messages and when it was triggered and all information you can check on the dashboard. And inside information, also you can check the transaction details and the processing time, all this information. And there is another tab, logs tab. So within this logs tab, you can verify this information when the application is started and what are the flows that are started within the API and on which resource or listener it is listening the API. And here we have two types of logs. One is system log and worker logs. Worker log is the kind of the information that will be logged and will be printed that we have added within the flows by using loggers. And also if any errors occurs, we can see within the worker loggers. And system loggers is something that on which system the application is deployed. So if we see this, this is the IP address. Since this will be in the control of Mulesoft, so they are going to deploy the applications randomly onto the different servers which are available. So these IP addresses will be varied from time to time whenever we restart the application or we redeploy the application. Okay. And we will observe other things. Go to settings. So in the settings, we have seen that while deploying the application, we have observed the runtime version, vCores, and also the workers. So all this information, we can even able to change it from the runtime manager. And logging. So this is the information we can provide, which kind of logs we can print within the application. So here we have mentioned information, and since the package name is not mentioned, all the information loggers will be printed. And this static IPs. So static IPs means like we have mentioned that the application will be deployed to different available servers by using Mulesoft default strategy. If we provide this static IPs, so it is going to be deployed to this particular mission where even though it is restarted. Okay. Likewise, we can configure this static IP. Now let us test this application. Here we have this app URL. Click on the app URL. So whenever we click on this app URL, you can observe this. It has provided with DNS name. It has been opened with the DNS name, and it is saying no listener for the endpoint. So add our resource name like suppliers, and it is saying bad gateway. Let me check. Okay, it is using HTTPS. Remove the HTTPS and send a request. So with this DNS name and the resource name, we are able to serve the application and we can respond to the consumers by this response. Likewise, we can test this URL from Postman also. So this is our local URL. Instead of local URL, I'm going to provide the Cloudhub service URL. I am getting the same response. Now observe this. So this is the protocol and this is the DNS name. And since it is a Mulesoft hosted environment, we can see the default domain name with ending with region US-E2 and cloudhub.io. This is a default DNS domain name that are going to provide, and this is the resource. Now we will observe this logs information within the CloudHub. So go to logs. Within the logs, here you can see the suppliers API flow completed, and observe the logs like this event is triggered at so and so time, and the log has been started. And what are the information that we were seeing within the local environment, we are able to see it even in the CloudHub environment. So CloudHub is nothing but a Anypoint platform runtime manager. And this is the event ID. It will be automatically generated. And here also we are able to see only the information loggers. Okay. And this is the event ID. Now let us enable the debug logger that we have configured. So I'm going to settings tab and click on the login within the settings tab and go to Anypoint Studio. From Anypoint Studio, go to the debug logger information. And here we have a category. Copy that category. And here add the level as debug and package name as the category that we have configured. And click on apply changes. Now go to logs. So to enable this information for debug logging, we don't need to restart the application. That is the benefit of logging and enable logging or disable logging the information. So without even restarting the application. Now let us try to submit a new request. Click on send. And come to the browser. So in this browser, if we observe the information, so this is the new event which is generated after configuring the debug logger. And this is the event. And here, if we see this suppliers payload. So suppliers payload is now able to print within the loggers information. And here we can even observe the level of logging, debug logger. Okay, likewise, we can configure and define the scopes of the logging mechanism by using the log level within the Mule application and flows so that it won't be printed unnecessarily for all the times. And this is fine. Now we want to analyze the logs. How can we analyze the logs and how we do this within the CloudHub? So let us understand this. This is the event ID, for example. So I don't want to see all the loggers that are irrelevant for me. So I know the event ID. So I wanted to search based on the event ID. In that case, we have a search tab on the top side. So here you can provide the event ID and click enter. So whenever we click enter, we can observe the information or logs that are relevant or specific to this event ID. And it can be with information like the timestamp, date, and also on which worker this event is processed. All this information we can observe within the loggers. Because this logger worker 0 means sometimes what will happen, whenever we need, or if there is a need to deploy this application on multiple servers or multiple workers. So here we can see worker 0, 1, 2, like that, based on the number of workers that we have added. So in generally, why we add these workers means to increase the load balancing and to serve more traffic. Okay, all this information we can see. And let us observe the different logging analysis options. I'm going to remove this event ID. And here we have the option like date and time. So we can mention that from which date to which date we want the logs to be filtered. So this is like a filter condition. We can mention that 6 to 6. And for example, it is 12/24/20. 12/24/20. And I want 12/26. Click on apply. So you can see only the logs within that particular time frame. Okay. And let us enhance this search. Here we have the priorities, whether you want to see only the error information in or if you want to only the debug level loggers. All these priorities also we can set by using the priority option. If we leave it as all priorities, that means it will print or it will show the information that is related with all the level of loggings. And here by default, it is also mentioned that to have a filter conditions for last 1 hour or last 24 hours. That means last 24 hours is different from last 1 day, because from that particular time, it will backtest to the last 24 hours and show the logs. And last week, last month, like this, we can get that information on logs. And if we do not mention this time, it will consider the default time as 00 and then to that particular time, or it will even print the information to this particular dates. And one more thing, so logs will be persisted. Persisted means the logs within the Mulesoft by default will be stored only for 30 days, or if the data or the log information size is reached to 100 MB, means for example, we have deployed the application today, and today is December 6th. Get these details on January 7th, we won't be able to get this information of December 6th because it is already crossed 30 days. That means we can backtrace only last 30 days of records. Otherwise, we can get only 100 MB of data, get only the 100 MB of logs in Mulesoft Cloudhub. So this is the first way that we have deployed our application in Mulesoft by using auto deployment from Anypoint Studio. Now we are going to make a change. What I'm going to do, I'm going to add one more logger. I want to count the suppliers. So size of payload. And here we can configure the category. If we do not configure the category also, the logs will be printed. But when we wanted to search based on the particular category, this logger will not be appear. So I'm going to change this and save the changes. Click on run, so that it will generate a new jar application, and we are going to upload it manually to the Cloudhub. Application is deployed. Let me test from Postman to the local URL. It is returning the response, and let us observe in console. So yeah, the supplier info is logged and suppliers count is 4. And if we observe, it is not having any category, custom category, and it is logging with a logger message processor category. Okay, that is the difference. If we do not configure any category, let me go to the target application, refresh it, and observe. Yeah, the supplier jar is available. Now go to browser, and from browser, within the settings tab, there is a application file. If we wanted to download this application, which is available on the server, you can click on this particular link so that it will be downloaded to your local machine like this. So it will be downloaded. I'm going to cancel it. Yeah, it is already downloaded. It's fine. Now, if we want to upload the jar from your local machine, choose file, upload file to the specific workspace and select the target application, supplier separate, and click on apply changes. Now go to logs. So whenever we redeploy the application or restart the application, it is going to generate in separate logs based on the particular timestamp. So since it was restarted, we have uploaded a new file. It is going to generate a new logs based on the time. For example, if we want to check for the logs in the previous hour or previous deployment, you still need to go to the previous deployment session, and then you can check for that particular logs. And let us observe this. Here, what is the Cloudhub IP address? 18118. And let us check this in previous log. 18118.198.94. And here the worker is starting on 18.118.226.194. But in our previous case, the worker was started at 118.198.94. So this way, Mulesoft is able to deploy the application on the available servers. We don't need to worry or bother about it. Our API is started. Let us wait until it turns into green, this deploying tab. The application is successfully restarted. So let us test from Postman. And click send. We have received the response. Now observe the loggers. So in our previous deployment, we do not have this logger, and which is added in the new version of the deployment. So that way we can upload a new version of the file even manually. Or if you want to like rewrite the application from studio also, you can use that option. Click on even perform that update or override operation even from the Anypoint studio. Right click on the application, deploy to Cloudhub. So here you can see that override the application option. Let us wait. Yeah. So if we do not select this override application, then it will throw an error because it was unable to deploy the application because this application with this name was already existed. And because one more thing we need to know that this application name is unique across the global because we are running our applications on the Mulesoft public domain. So make sure that the application name is not existed. So click on overwrite application and click on the deploy application. So in that way, you can overwrite the application. Now, let us try to configure this enable debug option from our local environment. Because whenever we have run that service locally, so localhost 8081 suppliers. Yeah, we are getting the response. But within our local environment also, we were unable to see the debug loggers. So to configure the debug loggers within the local environment, we can do it by using the source main resources folder structure, and there is a log4j2.xml file. So within this file, we can see different options like how the rolling file. Rolling file means whenever we are generating the log files, so how this log file name has to be generated and how frequently the log file can be renamed. So by using this -i means it can generate the suppliers API 1, 2, 3, 4, and the number of the amount of information that can be stored within that particular file will be up to 10 MB. So whenever this 10 MB is reached, then the information will be right into the new file. So in this way, we can configure the appenders and the log4j information. And here, if we see this asynchronous information logger, in this level of information, it will be printed onto the loggers. Now we are going to configure the debug information. So level is debug, but the category is our HPT suppliers debug category. Configure the debug information. Now save the changes. Since it is log4j changes, redeploy the application. Redeployment means you can stop and run the project again. Application is deployed. Send a new request and observe the loggers. Maximizing the console. And here we can see this. This is the information logger, which is by default printing, but the debug logger was not appearing on the console. And we now enabled it through the log4j configuration. And in this way, we can enable or disable the debug loggers within the Anypoint Studio as well as within the Cloudhub. So we have learned the simple API is developed with the sample data of suppliers information, and we have created a get suppliers resource, and we have added a simple flow with multiple loggers, information loggers and debug loggers, and with category and without category. And then we have deployed the application manually and also deployed the application to Cloudhub using a Cloudhub deploy to Cloudhub option from Anypoint Studio and observe the logs. So here log analysis has like So in log analysis, we can search the logs within the time frame, or we can use the keyword and the event ID and the priority. In this way, we can perform the log analysis or the event tracking. Event tracking is mostly of the event ID. And if we are going to call any other APIs, other Mulesoft APIs, so within the Mulesoft, it is happening. The event ID will be sent across the APIs if we are calling any of the APIs. In this way, we can achieve the event ID or event tracking. Yeah, that's it for today. Thank you. Please like, share, and subscribe.